the last presentation, which will be on how to prepare for a plant upgrade, which will be hosted by one of my peers in the, as Bill Hester said, the forgotten corner of Connecticut. That's us, Northwest Connecticut, proud. We have a tight network of plant operators here, and Ed and I have a very good working relationship because we have an IMA together, so I have to get along very well with Ed. So first, I'll introduce Ed Tausey III. He's the Torrington WPCA Administrator. Ed is currently the Administrator for the City of Torrington. Ed is responsible for the overall management of the Torrington Water Pollution Control Facility, sanitary sewer collection system, and wastewater pump stations. Ed joined the City of Torrington in 2003 and is a Class 4 wastewater operator and holds a NOEA Class 4 collection system operator and a NOEA Grade 2 laboratory analysis certification. Ed is also certified in the Pipeline Assessment Certification Program, Manhole Assessment Certification Program, sorry, there was a comma there, and Lateral Assessment Certification Program through the National Association of Sewer Service Companies. Ed has also completed the Connecticut Deep Wastewater Management Leadership Program. Prior to joining the City of Torrington, Ed worked for a general contractor and worked on the upgrade of 4 wastewater treatment plants. The wide range of experience gives Ed a unique perspective for this presentation. And then Christine Kurtz, and if we're going to talk about 7th degrees of separation, the plant that I run in Litchfield was last upgraded in 2003, and Christine was part of the team that worked on the engineering of that plant. And she started her career over 32 years ago after graduating with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in engineering in from Lafayette College. When she started working in the environmental engineering field, she returned to school to receive her Bachelor of Science degree in environmental engineering from the University of Hartford. Her consulting experience started in the water and wastewater field, doing house inspections and smoke testing. She has progressed through her career and is now a senior project manager at Wright Pierce in the wastewater practice group, is co-chairman of the Employment Engagement Committee, and is a Wright Pierce shareholder. Christine has been responsible for the planning, management design, construction, administration of wastewater treatment plant upgrades, pumping stations, and various sewer and water main projects, including the recently upgraded Torrington Water Pollution Control Facility. So please give them a good, warm welcome to the podium.
So we're happy to be up here to share our experience that we've been working on this project together, actually for the last almost 20 years. No one asked us about our favorite movie. I will say that mine is Grease. But I will also allude to Seinfeld, the series Seinfeld, because I am a low talker. I don't know if you remember that episode, but I'm a low talker. Most interesting experience, I don't know if Craig is still here, but I did jump out of an airplane this summer over Newport. Went skydiving, most amazing experience. I recommend it to anybody.
Okay, favorite movie. I don't really like doing favorite movies because I feel like it's like saying favorite dessert. Like, I don't want to keep watching the same movie every week, but I might eat the same dessert. If I got to pick one, I'd say Outlaw Josie Wales. That's what I would say. To get started with this, how to plan for an upgrade. I got to be honest, I have not been part of this planning since 2004. In 2004, I was driving a plow truck for the highway department in Torrington at that time. So, Wright Pierce was doing this with Ray Drew, our former administrator. I jumped in right before the construction started. So my input was more all during the construction. That's an experience I had. Okay.
So some of the things we'll talk about is the project team, our timeline for the project, including planning, design, and construction, and then the actual construction period itself, the things that happened during that. We're just going to jump around and give you a picture of things that were happening. It was a 3-year construction period, so the team included State of Connecticut, of course. They are the funding agency. They've been with this, all the planning and over the last 20 years, as well as design and construction. Torrington and Wright Pierce have been working together for that time period as well. Nickerson was the contractor on the project. Other entities involved include Army Corps of Engineers for permitting reasons, and then the town of Harwinton. The Torrington treatment plant is located in Harwinton, so any local applications went to the town of Harwinton, but we also gave the city of Torrington a complimentary set. So timeline, you've heard us allude already. This has been a 20-year process. The first facility plan, this is the document that starts to outline the kind of work that's going to happen in your upgrade, was in 2004. It was a draft. It took 3 years for the state and Wright Pierce and the city to come to a final plan. So we're calling that 2007. What started happening around that time frame was the idea of phosphorus removal. So while the state was starting to determine or try to get an EPA approval on what the limits were going to be at each of these facilities, the city of Torrington put a regional fog facility in, and then they also realized the need to do an update to their plan. So that started in 2011, was submitted to the state in 2012, approved by the state in 2014, design started in 2015, and then was submitted to the state for approval in 2017. Once the approval was obtained, we went to bid in April of 2018 for the first time. Due to a couple of circumstances, the state did not approve the bidder at the time, so the second bid went out in July. The contract start date was October 2018. Everybody recognizes the symbol between 18 and 21. That happened. And then the original contract end date was 21. There was a 130-day extension, and we just issued the final payment, approval for payment in 22.
In this timeline, when you could see we had to go back out to bid. The bid actually came out $4 million lower. With the same contractor. I don't think that's, they were held back, I think, making that $4 million back. And that's kind of set some of the tone for our project.
This is true. So the first facility plan concentrated on nitrogen removal, and the overall the cost associated with the recommended plan at that time was $21.5 million. The updated plan, which included phosphorus removal and anything else that needed to be taken care of, their limit, 17.29 pounds per day, had a project cost of $51.3 million. That's what went to referendum. Then we went into design. There was an executive order issued by the federal government. A couple other things happened, and now the project was going to cost $72.6 million. So the city was put in a position to try and get another approval for an additional $20 million, and they were able to take care of that through a revenue pledge. However, that had to go through public hearings as well. This first line on this slide really has the biggest, if there has to be a takeaway, especially to the 20 guys that were, and young women that were up here talking about getting their management certificate. If you know you have an upgrade coming up, start pocketing away money. If in 5 years you think you have a big project happening, because you don't want your sewer users to get the impact of a big project in 1 year. Often you're battling a general tax base increase at the same time. So, increasing your sewer rate a little bit each year would be received better at the other end. The NIPDES permit for Torrington was, the final was dated in 2015. Along with that came the limits for the phosphorus, as well as a timeline that had to happen. They needed to be up and running April 1st, 2020. So in the first bid set of documents, the contractor was required to have tertiary treatment built and ready for 2020. Because time had passed, we elected to give them an allowance, and they could use chemical temporarily for that first year and get tertiary built by 21. You want to speak to the other drivers? You were saying it was
Okay,
gonna be-
some other issues for this upgrade. I gotta say, the past administration, at this plant really squoze every bit out of this plant. We were almost down to one blower. Barely had a working generator. There was like, as the upgrade was going on, stuff was falling apart. There wasn't a speck of life left in pieces of equipment as we shut them down. So, I mean, but you gotta be prepared for that. Putting money into it before the project ends.
Yeah, while we were in design, you were spending money.
Yeah. Some of the things to budget for, like, I guess there's, I don't know if this comes later.
Yeah, it
but-
does. Yeah, that's okay.
Go ahead.
So what we did during design, we had workshops with the staff. So that was regularly through the design, also by discipline, not necessarily the structural engineer, but like an IT engineer. We'd come in and talk to the staff. But I'll say it here and continue to recommend, ask questions and collaborate with your designers. We've been reading plans. I've been reading plans for 30 years. I know how to read plans. I know some people don't know how to do that. If you don't understand the plans, certainly ask questions, just like us asking questions of how you run your process, right? It says one thing in your O&M manual, but you guys are creative and do what you have to get your treatment limits. And things that you should be putting input to are listed here as well. How do you want your equipment laid out? You need to get access, get a motor off the back end of a pump. How do you want your equipment tagged? We renumbered stuff in Torrington. So that took an effort. We had to coordinate with the IT department, what kind of seals, I mean, really down to the last set of details. During the design phase, we had a couple pieces of equipment that were pre-selected, so UV and tertiary. That's because of, depending what style was selected, the infrastructure built would have needed to be different. So was UV horizontal, vertical, inclined, things like that.
One thing frustrating about an upgrade, and those of you that have been through it, you know, they only go so far with the specs. You don't always get the pieces of equipment you want. In some cases, it was frustrating for our staff to find we had certain pieces of equipment that didn't work as well as the equipment we had before.
They don't build just like they used to.
Yeah. Well, it's not only, yeah.
I mentioned the $20 million jump in fee needed to get the project constructed. These are some of the drivers of that. One of the bigger ones was Executive Order 13650. That's when the president issued the need for protection either 2 or 3 feet above flood elevation. Connecticut moved fast and integrated it into TR16, and then the executive order was rescinded. That required things like elevated construction, generators, 5 feet in the air, walls around tanks. It added scope to the project, in other words. One of the tanks that we had looked into just adding 3 or 5 feet to the top of it for this flood protection, it was 1960s construction and couldn't handle it, so we had to rebuild one of the aeration tanks. This would have been Ed's office. This is the admin building, 1938 construction, but we were sampling for PCBs, found PCBs. The lab is in there. It was cheaper to put a new lab in the admin building, in the new building, than it would be to remediate the PCBs here. And anything over $10 million goes through a value engineering session. So what that is, for those of you who haven't gone through it, it's like a 3 to 5 day brainstorming session. Outside engineers come in, look at the design, they offer a value. So try and reduce costs is one of their tasks, but also to add value. So at 30%, it's a high level. They were talking about, ultimately what came out of that was we eliminated supplemental carbon. You can build it later if you need it. We removed one of the primary tanks. We did not build the 4th aeration tank. So we took good chunks of money out of the project. And then the detailed stuff happens at the 60%. This slide just shows you a little bit about the two bids that happened. Like Ed mentioned, the second bid that came in from the same contractor during the first was $4 million and change lower for essentially the same scope. Some of the reasons why the bid was not accepted by the state was that there was only one bid submitted, and technically we did not have 30 days on the street. There was a federal holiday in there that wasn't accounted for in the 30 days. So we'll start talking a little bit about construction phase. Some of the things that happened here, notice to proceed starts the project on a contract date, but your mobilization might happen later. So for us, it was 2 to 3 months before the trailers showed up on site. You'll have a pre-construction meeting, really set the protocol for communication there, who can approve change orders, who gets approvals to change things on site, et cetera, things like that. It's a very fast-moving environment. This was October, so they needed to start to even talk about details like, you know, who's taking care of what part of the plant during winter when it comes to plowing and providing access. There's a whole series. Contract documents require other kinds of meetings, from pre-concrete, pre-painting, pre-roofing. So you're seeing a theme here. There are a lot of meetings. There's administration efforts related to making sure all three parties understood what needed to happen on a daily or weekly basis. So weekly meetings and MOPO meetings. MOPO, maintenance of plant operation. The plant has to stay running during this whole period.
Yeah, so that's your job as operators, their job is to build. And
Nonstop.
yeah, they're gonna get in your way, and not take in consideration your treatment. So it's your job is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
So sometimes you're at odds. They're under pressure to get done what they need to do, and you're under pressure to complete what you do every day. And sometimes doing it different ways and figuring out different methods. It's challenging, to say the least.
So the image to the right is a paving plan, phasing of paving. So some of the activity that you had to deal with while that was happening, you had septage, right? Your septage deliveries.
Yeah, so Torrington takes in quite a bit of septage, and we built a FOG facility, as Christine mentioned. So we needed to continue to keep that going through a construction site.
While the paving was going on. Those were interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got next. So this slide just shows you some of the things talked about during a routine meeting. Safety is always first, so because of COVID also, we had to set up protocols for how to deal with COVID. We did go to Teams meetings for a while. If any one of the entities had a positive test, there was the communication protocol. The project never shut down. There were some subcontractors that didn't come to the site on certain times when they were planned to come to the site.
So if you recall, the first year of COVID, and I think we all probably were under very similar protocols. It was usually quarantined for 14 days, and way back in the beginning. So we'll go on about how many extra sludge trucks we had. We had a lot of extra work, but we were losing staff on top of it, in the middle of it, because of COVID.
Right.
For 14 days. If they were sick, really sick or not, sometimes they weren't that sick, but you had a quarantine. So it was another challenge in the middle of this.
The picture at the upper right is a 3-week look-ahead schedule. So in these meetings, the contractor would kind of predict what he was going to do for the next 3 weeks. So the farther out, the reality of it coming to fruition wasn't all that accurate. So even though and we had to coordinate testing on the same time that we knew things were being completed. So again, open communication, keep the communication open. These are some examples of MOPO documentation. It doesn't have to be extremely formal, but first they would submit their ideas on how they would get into, say, to put bypass pumps to bypass flow around installing a meter. And then we'd meet on it to make sure the plant staff knew what was going to happen, or if they needed involvement. Torrington plant staff was very involved in the construction and very helpful.
Yeah, sometimes it was our ideas, sometimes it was their ideas. Some of their tie-ins were done from ideas from their experience, from doing plants in the past. Such as if it was like a 2 or 3 hour tie-in, we learned, to prepare for it ahead of time, take a couple primary tanks down, then during low flows, divert all the flow into them empty tanks, and that gave them their couple hours they needed. Worked well.
Yeah, so where we thought they might need 4 bypasses, they only wound up needing 2 for this project.
Okay, so you said different projects sometimes handle this differently. Torrington elected to put meters on all water and secondary electric that the contractor was going to use, and it ended up to be a trade item for that cost for us. But also, you got a budget for, there's going to be quite a bit extra overtime. You got to work around, kind of around the hours they're going to choose to work. Like these bypasses I was talking about, you're coming in early in the morning, like 4 in the morning to begin those. The paving operation was really 16 hours a day, so just be prepared for that kind of overtime.
Same with your effort helping them with cleaning tanks and.
Yeah, sometimes you were always cleaning tanks, taking tanks down. It was our responsibility to take it down once, but sometimes that happened multiple times for different reasons.
And then the alarms, you were going to mention maintenance, continue your maintenance.
Oh. Yeah, so if I was to do it over, you could see some missteps. So I don't know how other plants do it, but we like check our high water floats in all our buildings once a month. It's a monthly thing to check emergency lights. I would almost do that more often. Also check your call-out system. There's a lot of dust on all your electronics. We had a catastrophic flood. I don't know. In my experience, in my time working at the plant, I was on vacation and I got a phone call that our secondary pump gallery, all the way up to the top of the stairs, was filled with all our mixed liquor. It was one of them deals like, what? Because you're trying to think how to work your way through that and get treating as soon as possible. But that was a failure of the alarms to call out. So
Nickerson reacted quickly. They moved Sunbelt temporary pumps in right away.
yeah, everybody worked well to get that. I got seed delivered to the plant. We got, like you said, Sunbelt was there, hooked up temporary RAS pumps, I would say. Pumped out that basement, washed it. I give high marks to Traver. Took them pump motors and had them back to us in 2 days. So that's just a kind of thing, is double check your call out alarms and that sort of stuff more often.
Some of the other things ongoing, just as part of administration, tracking your AIS requirements, American Iron and Steel. There were a couple pieces that we had to have removed from the site. Special inspections are occurring, so that's where we have to coordinate the concrete work, et cetera, so we can get our inspectors in here to take testing samples, et cetera. Spare parts, transfer of spare parts is kind of a big one. Make it a formalized process. Often the contractor would just go drop it in the garage, and they told one person on the staff, but the rest of them didn't know. Little things like that would happen, or if they needed a spare part, they would grab it from the pile, and we'd have to wait from the manufacturer to replace the spare part. In this particular project, there weren't a lot of spare parts, but nonetheless, deliveries happening every day. Just the more formal the process is on that, the more likely you'll get everything you need. Beneficial use is the start of is a term used because of the funding especially, but this is a 3-year project, 3+ year project. In year 1, you might have a piece of equipment go in you're using by the 9th month, so you can't wait until the end of 3 years to start your substantial completion date on that piece of equipment. So those kinds of details have to get worked out. As each piece of equipment comes online, you're trained on it, you have an O&M manual, everything's put into place. So we've mentioned a little bit about COVID and some of the things we had to deal with during that time. I mean, we're still dealing with, all of us, to some degree. The project never stopped. Subcontractors did not show up at time, like the whole company, but that didn't impact progress, really. Manufacturers, the one that was a little bit shocking was startups and manufacturers and reps weren't always able to come out. Their company policy wouldn't allow them to be on site, so we had to work around that. We've had a couple of startups by phone. I would say we really didn't get affected by equipment and supply chain, not until the end. You know, Nickerson, I think, bought a lot of their stuff up front.
So the last year, if we came up with any change orders or anything, they didn't even want to talk about it because they knew they weren't going to be able to get any more piping, fittings, none of that stuff was going to happen, so.
Starting to slow down.
Yep.
An interesting thing that happened on this project what was related to blasting. So the picture on the left shows you across the river. There's a private property owner was starting to blast to get that ledge down for future development. And the trailers, which you can see on the lower left corner of the far right picture, the guys would be in the trailers and they could feel the trailers would shake. So we called a meeting with the property owner. Turned out they had a permit to blast for a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, all the structures on the western side of the plant, closest to where the blasting was happening, were pouring concrete. So there was concern there about the pours and or the curing time. The blasting company paid to have seismic meters put in on the site. They got called, there was some attempts at planning. They would call, give us emails when the blasting was occurring so that Nickerson could plan their pours accordingly or try to. We got reports from the seismic meters after each blast. And you know, the important time frame for concrete curing isn't necessarily the concrete pour or the couple of days after. It starts on like day 2 through say 7. Those were the critical times when we couldn't have numbers at above a certain range. And then to top it off, that instead of a couple of weeks, it was months worth of blasting.
Months.
So you can see on the right, the picture, there's not 1 ounce of grass left. I mean, the contract had a couple of spots designated for the contractor to have their laydown area. They put stuff anywhere they could find ground, but they had a couple crews going at once. This was not, you know, work in one building at a time, move to the next building kind of a project. We had some personnel changes throughout the whole, I would say even in just design and construction, there were personnel changes. So with that comes people's ideas are different. And so we had to manage that through design and construction.
Oh, our senior plant operator didn't have an office to himself to do his reports and so forth. We added that in.
He was there through design, all the way through the design?
John was there for design, yeah. He wasn't a big fan of the whole upgrade project at all.
So then he retired. Yeah. And Ray was superintendent. And then you're in the mix somewhere there.
So during that period, I was process control operator. Years before this upgrade happened, we were experimenting. We were trying different ways to treat phosphorus for fermentation. We took down irrigation tanks and made selector zones with plywood and 2x4. Some of the ingenuity stuff that Ray was alluding to. But we couldn't maintain a low enough number in our biological treatment. So that was sort of what led us to the driving force of the upgrade. I moved into, from process control operator, John left, and I became senior plant operator, and real short after that, Ray left. Ray did not leave. He went up to City Hall. He still works up City Hall. So he just wasn't intimately involved with the project any longer.
Well, when COVID hit, he had to help deal with that from the city's perspective, so he tried.
Yeah.
And then on our side, you know, we had, unfortunately, our architect passed away at like 80% design. Then our RPR person retired when the project was supposed to be ended, but we had the extension. So we brought another RPR on site to come in for that the 11th hour. So, you know, just dealing with personnel changes. I know that's happened in past projects too. You know, the second round of staff comes in and wonders why something was designed a certain way or did a certain way, and it was because the first set of guys wanted it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Harwinton hired their own separate inspector for certain things, so that happened for the first year, coordinating that, but then eventually realized they didn't need to do that, so that was a short-lived thing. Tertiary treatment timeline, that was because that second year it needed to be up and running by that second April 1st. Some of the equipment, like there's a lift station in front of it, it was thrown into operation before it was fully tested out. Performance tested happened partially 1 year, and then it was completed the second year.
Yeah, so the first year during the project, they were unable to meet that deadline, and we did chemical addition for our phosphorus treatment out of totes and LMI pumps.
It's a little bit of a challenge. You can speak to these, the rain.
So, yeah, after the first year, so, right, into the first year, Christmas time, we had, I don't know, have the data on how much rain we had, but it was a lot. And there were some of the demolitions coming out of our D-box, coming out of primaries that wasn't completed, and we were within inches of coming out of them primary tanks. So that was another challenging moment.
You've already explained your vacation drama. This is what.
Oh, this is where you wanted me to talk about that.
Yeah, that's all
The
right.
flood is secondary too.
But the biggest piece of that was, you know, not having mixed liquor afterwards, but you said you had it up and running in like 2 days?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of equipment destroyed. There was about $100,000 worth of damage.
We had some design changes during construction. That happens anyway, often, but the scale of them sometimes were seemed a little bigger at this one. Easy changes in construction or is elimination, right? Just tell the contractor not to do something. They don't do it, you get a credit. We got a waiver from the state building department to not have to put the sprinklers in the tertiary building. That was pretty straightforward. As things were progressing on the construction site and everyone saw the activity and the lack of space, actually, the city wanted to get their training room, their existing one, moved into the new admin space. So that green highlighted square shows the space that was added. So we designed that into the building. Meanwhile, we had already gotten the submittal for the garage building, and we were reviewing that. We had a couple go-arounds on that. It's pretty easy to tell them to make it, 20 feet longer, everything else the same. So while that was going on, the rest of the coordination was going on, like electrical, et cetera. What really that did is added time to the construction of this building, which pushed masonry work into the winter, which the contractor wanted money for to heat the building so they could do masonry. So be cognizant of the types of changes you are asking for during construction. They happen differently than during a full design project. This next item, as things come to fruition, or as they're being built, the staff, especially the maintenance guys, would see what they had to deal with, right? Something as little as where there was concrete curbing and they needed to plow snow off to the edge, make those kinds of changes on the fly. Those are pretty small, but again, that goes back to make sure you can be involved or asked to be involved during design so we can do it the way you want. We don't operate these plants. So I learned as much from them as hopefully they learned from us. Just a quick reminder, DEP approvals need to be done for anything greater than $100,000, and that's not net. So if you have a $150,000 change order and it gets paired with a $60,000 credit, you still have to get that pre-approved before you do that work. And just, again, because things are moving fast on a construction project, and now we can make phone calls and texts and emails to get approvals, be as good as you can about documenting changes. We were, again, 3-year project. In year 3, we were trying to remember why we came to a conclusion or a decision that was made in year 1. It's easy to search emails, but nonetheless. This is working. Help.
What?
It's not moving.
Won't go?
It's locked.
Okay. Not a touch screen. Okay, so one of the big increases in the middle of the project was we switched from liquid sludge to cake. And so we went out to bid. And it was shocking. And I think a lot of us have been hit with the new costs of sludge removal and disposal, transportation, I should say. So that was shocking. I probably would have seen it anyways, but because I went out to bid, I saw the new prices quicker than probably most. During that period, one of the things I would have probably did different too. So there's things the contractors required to do to contractors. Temporary systems they're supposed to put in place. And they'll
Be creative.
they'll figure out a different way to do it or try to talk you into a different way. And one of the things that happened is they had to pull out our gravity belt and construct and bring in screw presses. And they wanted me to continue doing liquid sludge without the dewatering system, but he was going to pay for the extra trucks. But I don't think, he said it would be about 4 weeks. I think it ended up being about 4 months, running into the summer, when you can't settle sludge anymore very well, the late summer. And I don't think I don't know if he knew or didn't know the exact amount would be. So we went from 2 to 3 trucks a day, 5 days a week, to about 8 trucks.
With
Yeah.
the increased costs.
So,
yeah.
so that's not only just the cost of the trucks. As you all know, you need manpower to load those trucks on a regular basis. Increases your day. That's another thing that increases your day. So, just something to keep in mind. I mean, had I been one of these things, if I could do it over, I would have made them. I don't even know if they knew where to get a temporary solids handling unit, but that would have had to happen. It was a lot of expense on the town.
We also dealt with this last summer, was it this past summer or the one before, where the incinerator was down for repair?
So that was, so we got the screw press turned over to us, and within 2 weeks, the incinerator was down in Naugatuck, and they wanted me to go back to liquid. The the same process for 4 weeks. So, and keep in mind, you had this 1-year warranty period. So that's a month we didn't get to operate that piece of equipment.
That's one of those unforeseen things, though.
Yeah. That was no fault of the contractor. That warranty was ticking away. That piece of equipment was sitting there, but not being operated.
And so as we wind this down, we just included a couple of pictures to show you random activity on the site. You know, this is the third final clarifier that was being built. You said when you built a...
So I was saying to Christine, because I worked on these myself in the 80s into the 90s. And you see the way they're piecemealed together, a round tank like that? We used to do the whole pour at one time, the whole base. Like, I could think of some plants doing a base slab like that was a 12-hour pour, nonstop. But yeah, they do. I saw a lot of methods used now in 2020, a lot different than what we used to do.
This is a picture of the generators elevated so that the top of the fuel...
Higher than 5 feet, Christine, though.
Yeah, it does look a little higher. This one's above the 500-year flood. But again, it was related to the need to protect either 3 or 2 feet above flood elevation as well. Pictures of, you know, you're going to put all this instrumentation and control in your aeration tanks if that's the kind of upgrade you're going through. Visualize the need to get all the conduit out there and the air piping out there. So what was once an open tank with some old hand railing, you start to see this above-grade infrastructure come into play. Tight spaces, when you're going through a rehab with an existing plant, you have to put big pipes in tight spaces, creative. You know, the contractor is really good about creatively, how to put things in creatively.
That's a good shot of the conduit in the bottom there. That's underground at our plant.
Right, that's
The
into the...
electricians had their work cut out for them.
All of the electrical was replaced. That's the main service feed into the electrical room. The photo on the upper right is the tertiary structure and all the intricate pores and walls involved with that. That's a ballasted flocculation system. That's the original plant picture. Here's a picture of during and after. The one on the left you've seen, that shows all the, you know, no grass left and the blasting across the river. And then one on the right is the completed plant. And then just some key takeaways, you know, it's a lot of, you know, how you go through your upgrade is related to the workshops you're involved in, your input to them, the relationships you have with the entities involved, contractor, engineer, and the owner. Keep the communication open and document things. And that's just a brief overview of the last, say, 6 years.
Any questions?
Not a question, but thanks for the flashback of 10 years of my life.
Yeah, I toured that. That's right. Actually, we toured Manchester right before we started ours, if you recall.